Hello, I'm the Analyst, and normally I'm here to talk about Hollywood's biggest box office flops. Today, however, we'll be returning to a familiar topic, YouTube. And don't worry, we'll get back to the flops soon. As you see, it happens to be the birthday of one of my favorite YouTubers, Josh Strider, who most of you better know as Phantom Strider. We previously collaborated to do the top 10 Nostalgia Critic episodes back in July. Anyway, so today we'll be counting down the top 10 Phantom Strider episodes. Of course, he has 2 channels worth of content on both Phantom Strider and Live Strider, so we'll only be focusing on Phantom Strider videos. And don't worry, I'll get to Live Strider eventually. Now on to the countdown, and yes, I note the irony of this being a top 10 list about top 10 lists. Number 10. The top 6 worst games of all time. One of Strider's earliest lists, he discusses a series of video games he finds to be the worst, ranging from the utterly incompetent Zelda CDI game and Club Drive to the childhood letdown that was Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 to the utter offensiveness of Plumbers Don't Wear Ties and Custer's Revenge to the sheer what the heck of Daikatana. Strider nicely avoids picking on many of the games most people would put on a worst games of all time list, such as Big Rigs, Over the Road Racing, Ride to Hell, and E.T., as well as giving perspective on other games that are notoriously bad. And it's also hilarious seeing the scores out of 10 he gives for each game, especially as they drop into the negative digits.
I would give this game -50.
Number 9. Top 10 Worst Animated Movies. One of Strider's most popular videos at nearly 2.3 million views, Phantom Strider discusses some of the worst animated movies of all time, ranging from mockbusters like Ratatouille and A Car's Life to misguided kids films like Delgo and Dougal to the sheer WTF-ness of Tentacolino and
Elf Bowling the movie.
Elf Bowling?
And one of Strider's best jokes is to compare a piece of media to something poorly done, like in these examples.
He was? Well, imagine if a crazy hobo decided to remake this movie and painted the whole thing with the grime from under his fingernails. That would be brilliant animation compared to Ratatouille. Imagine Fast and the Furious. Now imagine they had 1/1,000,000th of the budget, hired a pot-smoking hobo to voice the lines, smeared fecal matter all over the camera lens, and then, no, that movie would still be better than A Car's Life.
It's clear that Strider really cares about good animated films, and that none of these are among the best, culminating with the utter disaster that is
Food Fight.
Oh, I'll make space.
Number 8. Top 10 Worst Cartoons of All Time. Strider goes after some of the very worst cartoons ever made, whether they be incompetent 50s cartoons like Patty the Pelican, or annoying and gruesome modern cartoons like The Nutshack, Breadwinners, or King Star King, culminating in a 5-minute plus rant about how awful number 1 is. Ren Seeks Help. I never actually knew how bad that show was until watching the video. I mean, I knew adult party cartoon was hated, but to this degree? Now I know. Of course, this episode does feature some rather cringe-inducing imagery, which keeps it from ranking higher up on the list. Specifically when talking about mega babies and Drawn Together the movie. I would show you what that imagery would be, but I'd rather we all get some sleep tonight. Number 7. Top 10 Worst Family Guy Episodes. If it isn't obvious, Strider really doesn't like Modern Family Guy, as all of the entries on this list come from season 7 or later, and even then, almost all of them were aired in 2010 or later. He'd even name Modern Family Guy the worst cartoon of the 2010s. That's saying something. He shows that the show has a few decent moments in its later seasons.
Time wasting to an unpleasant bickering between Meg and the family. While Meg has every right.
Annoying to disturbing to creepy to downright nihilistic. And then we get to Brian's a Bad Father, with its infamous suicide joke. Strider shows genuine concern to his audience.
If you ever feel suicidal thoughts, call this number in the US.
And really lets Family Guy have it for including such a joke. Much like the previous entry, though, some of the imagery is rather cringe-inducing, particularly during Herpy the Love Sore. Number 6. Top 10 Spookiest
Cartoon episodes.
Released for Halloween 2016, Strider decides to go from counting down the best or worst cartoons to the creepiest as he looks at some of the darkest cartoon moments, ranging from dark episodes of good cartoons like Steven Universe and Gravity Falls, to films like Watership Down, to David Lynch's utterly surreal Dumbland, to the downright disturbing episodes from episodes of SpongeBob and Invader Zim. He takes a broad interpretation with spooky, showcasing just what people could think as spooky. And he would later further explore the dark side of cartoons with the darkest Disney moments, as well as the darkest cartoon villains. Number 5. Top 10 Worst Sitcoms. One of the first videos I wound up sponsoring on his Patreon account, this video sees him take on some of the worst sitcoms ever, whether they be short-lived, stupid ideas like "Hi, honey, I'm home," "Whoops," and "Cavemen," to mainstream long-runners like The Brady Bunch. You have to admit this is a bit overly saccharine. To 2.5 Men. You have to admit this is way too crass. To old targets Hannah Montana and Fred, while also managing to find something positive about what many consider to be one of the worst shows ever, My Mother Car.
They even didn't have any laugh tracks. You don't know how refreshing that is.
Which only found its way to an honorable mention. Here, Strider goes outside his usual comfort zone, and this definitely isn't the last time he does so. Number 4. Top 10 Best Modern Cartoons. Strider considers this to be his best episode, and I can certainly see why. After countless vids of talking about terrible cartoons, he finally gets a chance to talk about something upbeat, the best cartoons this decade has to offer, ranging from Nickelodeon's rejuvenation by The Loud House, Heart v. Beaks, and The Legend of Korra, to Disney's creative genius with Gravity Falls and Star vs. the Forces of Evil, to the sheer imagination of Cartoon Network with Adventure Time and Steven Universe. While it may be more fun to watch criticism, sometimes it's just relaxing to watch praise. Number 3. Top 10 Worst Cartoon Network Shows. Like many people, this was actually my first exposure to Phantom Strider, and this remains his most watched video to date with over 4 million views. Here he gives sharp criticisms to some of CN's biggest mistakes, such as Teen Titans Go and the high fructose adventures of the annoying orange. Throughout all this, he does find some okay elements out of some of the shows, like the surreal Uncle Grandpa and its good messages, as well as the abysmally ugly problem solvers with okay voice acting. It says in the end that CN ultimately does do good work most of the time, with the exception of these shows, ranging from the irritating Johnny Test to the grotesqueness of King Star King and Mr. Pickles, both of which previously appeared in the worst cartoons of all time video, which I mentioned before. And at number 2, the top 10 worst movies of all time. Here, Strider talks about the worst live-action movies he's ever seen. And to do so, he gets one of the biggest reviewers ever. That's right, the Nostalgia Critic! And his appearance here is very much welcome, where Doug challenges Strider to find something worse than the Garbage Pail Kids movie.
Prove it! Fine, I will.
Something he actually does. Whether he gives us montages of annoying characters like Fred and Jill getting hurt, to just being baffled at the weirdness of older movies like Turkish Star Wars.
Own mixture of stock footage, bad explosion effects, and cut-ins of the director punching rocks for some reason.
And Santa Claus Conquers the Martians.
Are those funny things sticking out of your head?
Those are our antennae.
No, they're not. Those are bent forks.
He gives smart, funny commentary before going into just how detestable his least favorite movie of all time is.
Would you like some sausage? Daddy, would you like some sausages? Daddy, would you like some sausage?
And the number 1 Phantom Strider video of all time is Top 10 Best Nickelodeon Shows. Having previously showcased how bad of a shape Nickelodeon was in during his Top 10 Worst Nickelodeon Shows, he then shows just how good Nickelodeon was at one point, showing the shows that Nickelodeon had made which actually worked, from the nostalgic 90s cartoons like Rocko's Modern Life, Hey Arnold, and Rugrats, to some surprising picks, like My Life as a Teenage Robot and Harvey Beaks, to Nick's most daring shows like Avatar The Last Airbender and Invader Zim. And the good thing is, Nickelodeon apparently has been improving. This episode is easy to watch, funny, and really shows how Nickelodeon, at one point, truly wasn't reliant on SpongeBob and cookie cutter teen sitcoms. And for me, this is easily the number 1 Phantom Strider episode of all time. Phantom Strider really is one of my favorite YouTubers. I'm one of his patrons on Patreon, and it's pretty easy to see why. His videos are pleasantly narrated, smartly hilarious, and eye-opening. You might not agree with all of his opinions, but you can certainly understand where he comes from. Strider was my gateway into YouTube, which led me to people like the Nostalgia Critic, and for that I'll always be thankful. Do you think I missed a particularly good Phantom Strider episode? If you think so, let me know in the comments. And thanks for watching.